Life has a funny way of teaching you who really matters. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find out what you actually had all along. I remember the exact moment I realized I'd made it, standing in my new apartment at 28, keys still warm in my hand from where I'd been clutching them. The place needed work, and those mortgage payments, well, they still make me break into a cold sweat every month. But it was mine. All mine. The product of 6 years of pure hustle in real estate, of proving everyone wrong who said I'd never make it on my own. They say success is the best revenge, but honestly, success just showed me who was worth keeping in my life all along. And it wasn't who I expected. Let me take you back to where it all started. Picture this. A fresh-faced real estate agent, trying desperately to sound like I knew what I was doing while showing properties to clients who probably saw right through me. By day, I'd walk through houses I couldn't afford, pointing out features like I was some kind of expert. By night, I'd drag myself to my second job as an office manager, doing mind-numbing paperwork until my vision blurred. But I kept going, one sale at a time, one client at a time. One step closer to proving that my dad was right about me all along. Dad. Sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment late at night, I find myself talking to him. Look at me now, Dad, I'll whisper to the empty room. You were right. I did make something of myself. He always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. But he never got to see how far I'd come. He passed away when I was 18, right in the middle of my freshman year of college. That's when everything changed. And not just because of losing him. Mom remarried within a year to Douglas. He seemed decent enough at first, but he came with his own ready-made family, Heather and Derek, 15 and 14 at the time. I tried to be understanding, I really did. Mom deserved happiness after losing Dad. But Douglas, he had other plans for our family. Plans that didn't include any trace of the life Mom and I had before. I still remember coming home from college that first time, 3 months after Douglas moved in. The walls Dad and I had painted together, gone. The family photos with Dad's smile lighting up every frame, vanished. When I asked Mom where all our memories had gone, she barely looked up from her magazine. Oh, honey, she said, like she was explaining something to a child. Douglas thought it might be uncomfortable. You understand, right? We need to move forward. But it wasn't just the photos that disappeared. My childhood bedroom, the one where Dad and I spent countless nights stargazing through the window, where he taught me to dream bigger than the 4 walls around me, became Heather and Derek's game room. The quiet space where I'd grown up turned into a cacophony of beeping machines and artificial laughter. A slot machine's harsh lights now illuminated the corner where my desk used to sit, where Dad had helped me with my homework right up until high school graduation. You can use the guest room when you visit, Mom chirped, as if offering me a luxury suite instead of a glorified closet. The space barely fit a bed and a small table, but the message was clear. I wasn't really home anymore. I was just passing through. Heather and Derek wasted no time marking their territory. Every visit home from college brought some new accident. I'd find my childhood teddy bear, the one Dad gave me when I was 5, still wearing the little bow tie he picked out, stuffed at the bottom of the garbage bin. My high school yearbooks would mysteriously appear water-damaged, memories bleeding into illegible smudges. Family photos that once showed 4 smiling faces now displayed only 3, my image carefully cropped out as if I'd never existed. Life fell into a rhythm after that, but not the kind that soothes. More like the kind that wears you down, like waves against a shoreline. I finished college, dove into my career, and tried to maintain whatever fragile connection remained with Mom. Our phone calls grew shorter, more superficial. Each visit home felt like walking through a museum of everything I'd lost, complete with hostile tour guides. Look who finally remembered where she came from, Heather would announce whenever I walked through the door, her voice sweet as artificial sweetener and twice as bitter. At 25, she was still living at home, treating me like an intruder in the space where I'd grown up. Derek, barely a year younger, had perfected the art of the casual cruel comment. Nice outfit, he'd say, eyeing my work clothes. Must be fun playing dress up every day. Each word carefully chosen to cut, to remind me I didn't belong. And Douglas? He'd preside over these dinner table ambushes like a smug emperor, occasionally tossing in his own carefully crafted barbs. Real estate, huh? He'd say, sawing through his meat like he was practicing for a lumberjack competition. Must be nice playing house all day. Some of us have real jobs, you know. Through it all, Mom would sit there, eyes fixed on her plate, pretending the tension wasn't thick enough to cut with her carefully polished silverware. She'd vanished into their family so completely, there wasn't even a shadow left of the woman who used to sing me to sleep, who taught me to stand up for myself. The irony of that last lesson wasn't lost on me. I threw myself into my work, building my career one exhausting day at a time. My client list grew, commission checks got bigger, and slowly but surely, I carved out my own place in the local real estate market. Every success felt like a tiny victory, a step further from the guest room that was never really mine. But family has a way of pulling you back in, even when every instinct screams at you to run. And sometimes it takes one final breaking point to realize that the family you're born into isn't always the family you're meant to keep. The breaking point came during what I now call that awful final straw dinner. Heather was in rare form that night, taking shots at everything from my hair to my choice of wine. I sat there, gritting my teeth, tasting blood from biting my tongue so hard. 10 years of swallowing their venom had left me with a high tolerance, but even the strongest walls eventually crack. Must be nice, Heather sneered, swirling her wine glass like she'd learned the gesture from a bad movie, having mommy's connections to help you get started in real estate. Some of us actually have to work for a living. Something inside me snapped. 10 years of forced smiles, of taking their abuse, of watching my mother slowly erase our past. It all came pouring out like a dam breaking. I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign even to my own ears. Work for a living? That's rich coming from someone pushing 30 and still living off daddy's paycheck. When was the last time you even looked for a job? The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a tear drop, and there were plenty falling as Heather's face crumpled and she fled from the table. Douglas stood up, his face turning that particular shade of red I'd seen so many times before. "You nasty little brat," he spat, trembling with rage. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way?" I turned to Mom, some foolish part of me still hoping, after all these years, that she'd finally stand up for me. Instead, she shook her head, disappointment etched across her face like it had been carved there. "I can't believe you'd say something so cruel, Charlotte," she whispered. "That's not how I raised you." That's when it hit me, the realization that had been trying to surface for years. Nothing would ever change. Mom would always choose them over me. Always. The daughter she'd raised had disappeared the same day Dad died, replaced by this hollow version who nodded and smiled while her new family erased every trace of her old one. I left that night with tears streaming down my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry ones, cleansing ones. For the first time in my life, I felt completely done. No more trying to please everyone. No more walking on eggshells. No more pretending this was normal. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages from Mom's side of the family. Each one told me how horrible I was for hurting Heather's feelings. Funny how none of them mentioned how she'd been treating me for years. None of them seemed to care about my feelings at all. "You've really done it this time," Mom texted. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but until you apologize to Heather and Douglas, I think it's best if you don't come around." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was different now, cleaner somehow, like a broken bone finally being set properly after years of healing wrong. "Don't worry," I typed back. "I won't." The weeks that followed were surprisingly peaceful. It's strange how letting go of something toxic can feel both like drowning and learning to breathe all at once. I threw myself into my work, closing deal after deal. My clients loved me, maybe because for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to prove myself to people who'd never see my worth. I started looking at new cars, not because I needed to show off, but because I'd always dreamed of owning one particular model. The day I drove my Mercedes off the lot, something shifted inside me. It wasn't about the car, really. It was about finally allowing myself to want things, to achieve things, without measuring their worth against someone else's approval. I couldn't resist taking a few photos and posting them online. The likes and comments poured in, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. My phone lit up with Mom's name. After 3 months of silence, she was suddenly calling. I let it go to voicemail at first, but she kept calling. Again and again. Finally, I picked up, my heart drumming against my ribs. "Hello, Charlotte, sweetheart." Her voice dripped with syrupy sweetness, the kind that used to make me hope, but now just made my teeth ache. "I've been thinking about you so much lately. We really need to fix this situation. Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow night?" I almost laughed out loud. 3 months of silence, and now, right after I posted photos of my new Mercedes, she wanted to fix things. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Mom." "Please, honey," she pressed. "I've talked to Douglas and the kids. They feel terrible about everything. We all want to make things right." I should have said no. Every cell in my body screamed at me to protect myself. But there's this stupid, hopeful part of me that never seems to learn. The part that still remembers how Mom used to brush my hair before school, how she'd leave little notes in my lunchbox, how she used to be before grief and fear made her choose safety over love. The next evening, I pulled up to my old house in my new car. Douglas was standing in the driveway, and I swear his eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw the Mercedes. Heather and Derek appeared in the doorway, wearing expressions I'd never seen before, something between respect and calculation. "Look who's here." Mom rushed out to hug me. "Oh, sweetheart, we've missed you so much." The dinner was surreal. Douglas complimented my career choices. Heather asked about my clients with seemingly genuine interest. Derek even pulled out my chair for me. I felt like I'd stepped into some parallel universe where they actually liked me. Between courses, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen, squeezing my arm like we were sharing secrets like we used to. "I had a long talk with them," she whispered. "They realize how wrong they'd been. They want to start fresh." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. And for a while, it seemed real. I started visiting more often. The cruel jokes stopped. The snide comments disappeared. They were all suddenly interested in my life, my work, my success. But then I started noticing patterns, little warning signs I'd been too desperate to see at first. Every visit, without fail, the conversation would turn to their living situation. It started subtly, like poison seeping through slowly dripping water. "This old house just isn't what it used to be," Douglas would sigh, his eyes finding mine with practiced precision. "The roof leaked again last week," Mom would add, her voice carefully tuned to just the right pitch of helplessness. Heather and Derek played their parts perfectly, a well-rehearsed duet of complaints. Not enough bathrooms. Too little storage space. Outdated everything. Each time they'd look at me expectantly, waiting for something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I tried changing the subject whenever this happened, but they grew more persistent, like hungry wolves circling closer to their prey. One evening, as I was leaving, Mom followed me to my car. Her hand traced the Mercedes hood, the gesture almost possessive. "You know, sweetie," she said, her voice soft but calculated, "you're doing so well now. It must be wonderful to have such a comfortable life." The way she emphasized comfortable made my skin crawl. I was starting to understand why they'd suddenly become so nice to me, but I pushed the thought away. They were family, after all. Maybe they really had changed. Then Mom dropped the bomb about her upcoming 55th birthday. She mentioned it casually over coffee, but there was nothing casual about the way everyone stared at me, like audience members waiting for their cue. "It's quite a milestone," she said, stirring her coffee with deliberate slowness. I've been thinking about how to celebrate it properly. I took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. "Don't worry about planning anything, Mom. I'll take care of everything." The look that passed between her and Douglas should have warned me. The way Heather and Derek suddenly became extremely interested in their phones should have set off alarm bells. But I was still trying so hard to believe in this new version of our family that I ignored all the signs. I decided to go all out, to prove something, maybe to them, maybe to myself. I planned a party at my friend Jennifer's upscale restaurant in the city center, followed by a surprise trip to Hawaii for the whole family. The thought of paying for Douglas, Heather, and Derek to vacation made my stomach turn, but I told myself it was worth it to make Mom happy. Looking back now, I can see how desperately I was trying to buy the love that should have been freely given. But sometimes we need to make our biggest mistakes to learn our most important lessons. Planning Mom's birthday celebration became my obsession, as if I could somehow build a bridge back to her heart with every perfect detail. I called Jennifer right away, my words tumbling out in an excited rush. "I want everything to be perfect," I told her, my voice trembling with a hope I couldn't quite contain. "Money's not an issue." Jennifer's excitement mirrored my own, though now I realized she probably saw what I couldn't. "Leave it to me, honey. I'll give you my friends and family discount, but trust me, this will be an event to remember." If only she knew how right she would be. When Mom sent me her guest list, reality cracked through my carefully constructed fantasy. Out of 30 people, 25 were Douglas's relatives. I scrolled through the names, my heart sinking with each unfamiliar one, searching for the people who'd been there for every milestone of my childhood. Aunt Olivia, who used to babysit me and taught me how to braid my hair just like she did. Uncle Philip, who spent countless weekends teaching me to ride a bike, never losing patience even when I fell. Cousin Audrey, who was more sister than cousin, sharing secrets and dreams long into the night. None of them were there. Not a single one. I added them to the list without telling Mom. They deserved to be there, even if she had forgotten them or chosen to forget. When I called Aunt Olivia to invite her, the pause that followed my invitation spoke volumes. "Are you sure, sweetie?" she asked, her voice soft with understanding. "Last time I saw your mother, she made it pretty clear we weren't welcome anymore." "I'm sure," I said firmly, feeling stronger than I had in years. "You're my family too." The next week, I went to Mom's house to discuss party details. Heather cornered me the moment I walked in, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed greed. "So," she said, trying and failing to sound casual, "the restaurant party is your gift to Mom, I noticed." I saw Mom shoot her a warning look, but I chose to ignore it. "That's part of it," I replied, thinking of the Hawaii surprise tucked safely away. "I have something else planned too." A surprise. The way they all perked up at the word surprise should have been my final warning. Douglas and Mom exchanged glances that seemed to carry entire conversations, and Derek suddenly became very interested in our discussion. "A surprise?" Mom leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. "What kind of surprise, sweetheart?" I just smiled and shook my head, keeping the Hawaii surprise close to my heart like a precious secret. "You'll have to wait and see." The next hour was excruciating, a masterclass in emotional manipulation. They took turns trying to pump me for information, all while dropping increasingly obvious hints about houses. Douglas gave me a grand tour of every minor repair needed, his hand lingering on each crack and stain like he was presenting evidence in court. "You know, Charlotte," he said, gesturing at a water stain on the ceiling with theatrical concern, "with your expertise in real estate, you must know all about good housing opportunities." I nodded noncommittally, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing against my chest. "The market's pretty active right now. And successful agents like you must have all sorts of connections," Mom added, her eyes shining with a hope that made my heart ache, not for what she wanted, but for what we'd lost. The evening dragged on like this, with them circling closer and closer to what they really wanted. I kept deflecting, telling myself it would all be worth it when they saw the Hawaii surprise. Maybe then they'd realize that love isn't measured in square footage, that family means more than 4 walls and a roof. The night of Mom's birthday party arrived, and Jennifer had transformed her restaurant into something magical. Soft lighting cast gentle shadows across elegant flower arrangements, and the tables gleamed with promise. I arrived early, clutching the box containing the Hawaii surprise, first-class plane tickets and resort reservations for the whole family, wrapped in paper the color of ocean waves. Dad's relatives arrived first. Aunt Olivia hugged me tight, her embrace carrying the warmth of 1,000 remembered bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes. "You've grown into such a wonderful woman," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud." I blinked back tears, tasting the salt of memories and gratitude. These people, They were the ones who'd kept Dad's memory alive when Mom tried to paint over it. Douglas's family arrived next, a noisy wave of forced laughter and louder opinions. They claimed the best tables, practically pushing Dad's relatives to the edges of the room, like shadows to be forgotten. I watched this happening, feeling something shift inside me, not anger anymore, but a sad sort of clarity. When Mom, Douglas, Heather, and Derek arrived fashionably late, Mom looked beautiful in a new dress. But there was something off about her expression when she surveyed the room, especially when she spotted Dad's family. "What are they doing here?" she hissed at me between clenched teeth. "They're family, Mom," I said quietly. "They wanted to celebrate with you." The evening unraveled like a badly written play, each act worse than the last. Douglas's sister Sharon started the toasts, raising her glass with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "To my wonderful brother Douglas," she announced, her voice carrying across the room like a weapon, "who saved this family and gave them a real man to depend on." I watched Dad's relatives stiffen at these words, saw Uncle Philip's hands clench around his glass. Aunt Olivia touched his arm gently, shaking her head. Even after all these years, they were still protecting Mom, still choosing peace over truth. The toasts continued like arrows, each one aimed at erasing the past I held so dear. Douglas's relatives took turns praising him and his children, talking about what a perfect family they'd become. Mom beamed with pride while I felt increasingly sick, watching her glow under the light of lies that painted over our history like Douglas's fresh paint had covered Dad's memories. Finally, it was my turn. I stood up, holding the beautifully wrapped box containing the Hawaii surprise, my hands trembling slightly. The restaurant had gone quiet, expectant. "Mom," I started, my voice wavering with emotion, "you've always talked about wanting to see the world, about having adventures. So for your birthday, I wanted to give you something special." I handed her the box, watching as she took it with an odd expression, not excitement, but something more calculating, almost suspicious. As she unwrapped it, the room went silent. Mom stared at the plane tickets and resort brochures, her face growing darker by the second. "What is this supposed to be?" It's a family vacation," I explained, confusion creeping into my voice. "First-class tickets to Hawaii, 2 weeks at a 5-star resort. All expenses paid for all of you." The explosion that followed was unlike anything I could have imagined. Mom's face transformed into something I didn't recognize, something hard and cold and terrible. "A vacation?" Her voice cut through the air like ice. "You think we want a vacation?" Douglas stood up, his face flushed with rage. "This is what you call a birthday present? After all our hints?" "Hints?" I repeated, though understanding was already dawning, bitter and heavy on my tongue. Heather jumped up next, her carefully applied makeup cracking with fury. "We've been telling you for months what Mom really wanted. A house. She wanted a house, you stupid, selfish witch." The restaurant went silent, the kind of silence that feels like glass about to shatter. I looked around the room, seeing the shock on Jennifer's face, the pain in Aunt Olivia's eyes, the way Uncle Philip's jaw clenched in familiar protective anger. "A house," I said slowly, my voice trembling not with fear but with a strange kind of clarity. "I'm a real estate agent. I sell houses. I don't give them away for free. This trip cost me a fortune as it is." "A fortune?" Douglas scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Please. We've seen your car. We know you can afford more than some cheap vacation." In that moment, looking at their faces, Mom's disappointment, Douglas's rage, Heather and Derek's entitled anger, something crystallized inside me. All these years, I'd been trying to buy my way back into a family that had sold me out long ago. I turned to Jennifer, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "Could you please have security escort these people out?" "You can't do this." Mom shrieked as 2 security guards approached. "It's my birthday party." I grabbed the box of tickets from her hands, feeling the weight of years of manipulation fall away. "Not anymore, it's not. And you don't deserve any of it." What followed was chaos, but a cleansing kind, like a storm that washes away everything dead and stagnant. Douglas's family hurled insults as they were let out. Heather screamed about how I'd always been jealous of their perfect family. Derek called me every name he could think of. Mom just stood there, shaking her head in disgust, as if I was the one who had betrayed our family's legacy. After they left, the restaurant fell into an eerie silence. Then Uncle Philip stood up, his eyes shining with tears and pride. He raised his glass and said something that broke through every wall I'd built around my heart. I think it's time we remember the real man of this family. To Henry Miller, a wonderful father who would have been so proud of his daughter. We spent the rest of the evening sharing stories about Dad. Real stories, full of laughter and tears and all the messy, beautiful truth that makes a family real. Aunt Olivia told me about how Dad used to practice his dad jokes on her before trying them out on me. Cousin Audrey remembered the time he taught us both to make snow angels in the middle of summer, using sand instead of snow. Looking around that table, at these people who had kept Dad's memory alive when Mom tried to bury it, I realized something profound. Family isn't about who shares your house or even your blood. It's about who shares your heart, who holds space for your memories, who loves you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. The 2 weeks following the birthday disaster were surprisingly peaceful. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free from the guilt, the manipulation, and the constant pressure to prove myself to people who would never see me as enough. My phone stayed surprisingly quiet during those peaceful days. No calls from Mom, no texts from Heather or Derek, no angry voicemails from Douglas. I knew it wouldn't last, but I savored the silence, letting it heal parts of me I hadn't even known were broken. During this time, I grew closer to Dad's side of the family. Aunt Olivia invited me over for Sunday dinners, just like when I was little. The familiar scent of her pot roast and fresh-baked rolls wrapped around me like a warm blanket, carrying memories of simpler times. One evening, as we sat on her porch drinking tea and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of promise, she shared something that shifted my whole perspective. "You know," she said softly, her hands cupped around her steaming mug, "your father always worried about Diana, your mom. He said she needed people to take care of her too much. He was afraid it would hurt you someday." I stared into my tea, watching ripples dance across its surface. He was right. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. The first thing I did after the party was cancel all the Hawaii reservations. Instead, I planned something different, a week-long Mediterranean cruise for Dad's relatives who had stayed with me that night. They tried to refuse at first, but I insisted. This wasn't about buying love anymore. It was about celebrating the people who had kept faith with me all along. I was in the middle of booking their cruise when my phone rang. Mom's number flashed on the screen like a warning sign. Something told me to answer, to hear whatever she had to say, if only to remind myself how far I'd come. "Hello," I kept my voice neutral, steady. "Charlotte." Mom's voice was tight, controlled. No warmth, no apology, just business. "We need to talk about what happened." I waited, listening to the heavy silence between us. "Well, first of all, you humiliated us in front of everyone," she continued. "But we can discuss that another time. Right now, we have a more pressing issue." I could almost predict what was coming, but I let her continue. "Derek had an accident with the car yesterday. Nothing serious, but the repairs will be expensive. Since you're doing so well." I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not the bitter laugh from before, but something clearer, lighter. "Let me get this straight. You're calling me, not to apologize for what happened at your birthday, but to ask for money." "Don't be dramatic, Charlotte," she snapped. "Family helps family. And speaking of help, since you canceled that Hawaii trip, you could at least give us the money you would have spent on it. It's only fair." I sat in my home office, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother's demands with a strange sense of clarity. Everything suddenly crystallized. All the years of manipulation, the sudden kindness after seeing my success, the birthday disaster. It had never been about family. It had always been about what they could get from me. "Mom," I said quietly, cutting off her monologue about family obligations, my voice steady with newfound strength. "I did use that money. I'm sending Dad's family on a Mediterranean cruise." The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with barely contained rage. How dare you? Those people aren't even your real family anymore. I'm your mother. We're your family. No, I replied, feeling a profound peace settle over me like gentle rain. You haven't been my family since the day you chose Douglas and his kids over me. You stood by while they took over my childhood home, while they erased every trace of Dad. You watched them bully and belittle me for years, and you did nothing. That's not true, she protested. I always loved you. Love isn't enough, Mom, I said softly, feeling tears slide down my cheeks, not bitter ones this time, but healing ones. You didn't protect me. You didn't stand up for me. You let them push me out of my own family, and now you only want me around because you think I can buy you things. After everything I've done for you. She started crying then, but I'd seen this performance too many times before. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, my voice gentle but firm. Since Dad died, what have you actually done to help me or support me? I put myself through college. I built my career on my own. I bought my own home. The only time you show any interest in my life is when you want something from me. I'm your mother, she sobbed. You can't just abandon me. I'm not abandoning you, Mom. I'm finally setting myself free. I don't wish you any harm, but I can't be part of your life anymore. You, Douglas, Heather, Derek, you're not my responsibility. Fix your own problems. Live your own lives. Just leave me out of it. I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers, all of them. Then I sat there for a long time, looking at the photos on my desk. There was one of Dad and me at my high school graduation, both of us grinning at the camera like we shared the world's best secret. Another showed Aunt Olivia and Uncle Philip at Christmas last year, their eyes twinkling with genuine joy. And a new one from the night of Mom's birthday party, me surrounded by Dad's family, all of us raising our glasses in his memory. These were my people. This was my real family. The next day, I went to work as usual. I showed houses to clients, negotiated deals, and finalized the Mediterranean cruise arrangements for my true family. Life went on, but it was different now. Better. Lighter. Like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about Mom and wonder if she ever understood what she truly lost. Not the money or the gifts or the fancy house she wanted, but something far more precious, a daughter who would have done anything for her if she'd just been a real mother in return. But I don't dwell on those thoughts anymore. Instead, I focus on Sunday dinners at Aunt Olivia's, where we share stories about Dad and laugh until our sides hurt. I treasure the weekly calls with Cousin Audrey, who still knows exactly how to make me smile even on my hardest days. I cherish Uncle Philip's proud face when he visits my office, looking at my achievements with the same warmth Dad used to have in his eyes. I've learned that family isn't about blood or obligation or keeping up appearances. It's about love that doesn't come with price tags. It's about support that doesn't need to be earned. It's about being there for each other, not because you have to, but because your heart wouldn't let you be anywhere else. And sometimes, the hardest choices we make, walking away from toxic love, choosing our own worth, honoring our truth, those aren't endings at all. They're beginnings. Beautiful, brave beginnings of the life we were always meant to live. Dad taught me that, even though he couldn't stay to see it happen. And now, finally, I understand what he meant when he used to say, sometimes the family you choose is the one that was meant for you all along. I'll conclude with an emotionally resonant ending that captures both the personal transformation and universal truth of choosing authentic love. Looking out my office window now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of hope, I realize something profound. Every house I sell isn't just about square footage or market value. It's about the possibility of new beginnings. Just like I found mine, not in the physical space I call home, but in the hearts of people who love me unconditionally. Last weekend, at one of our Sunday family gatherings, Uncle Philip pulled out an old photo album he'd found in his attic. There, tucked between faded pages, was a picture I'd never seen before, Dad holding baby me, his eyes shining with a love so pure it took my breath away. Aunt Olivia wrapped her arm around my shoulders as tears spilled down my cheeks. He always said you'd find your way, she whispered. That you had his heart. too big to be contained by other people's expectations. And she was right. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on, it's letting go of the illusion of what family should be and embracing what it truly is. My real estate license hangs on my office wall, but my most valuable possession is the understanding that home isn't a place you buy or sell. It's not measured in square feet or market value. Home is where your heart recognizes itself and others. It's Sunday dinners filled with genuine laughter, phone calls that don't come with hidden agendas, and love that doesn't need to be earned or bought. I am my father's daughter after all. And finally, beautifully, completely free. Life has a funny way of teaching us its most important lessons. Sometimes we have to lose what we thought was family to find the one that was meant for us all along. And in that discovery, we find not just love, but ourselves, whole, worthy, and exactly where we're meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about life's unexpected turns and the courage it takes to choose ourselves.